Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world that you're watching from. And welcome to Resilience for Water, a talk show all about unlocking finance for nature-based solutions brought to you by WWF. My name is Hajer Koubi. I'm very delighted to be your host for this talk show today. So from me to you, I would say a very warm welcome, whether you're tuning in online or whether you're here in the room with us in Stockholm. It's amazing to see you all today. Now, in today's talk show, we'll dive into one of the most urgent challenges of our time. We know that climate risks are putting water systems and the people, the nature, and the businesses that depend on them under large and increasing stress. Yet, despite this issue that we see, despite the increasing stress, we also see that less than 1% of global climate finance goes to nature-based solutions for adaptation. One bold response to help scale up investment is the launch of CINSA, the Catalytic Investment for Nature-Based Solutions for Adaptation program led by WWF. This really aims to unlock large-scale investments in nature by bridging that finance gap. So in this session, we're going to explore how approaches like blended finance, parametric insurance, and strong cross-sector partnerships can help to close that adaptation finance gap that we see. And luckily, to help sort of like lead us through that conversation, I'm very delighted to be joined by, first of all, David Kuhn, who is the Director on Resilience Partnerships for WWF. David, welcome. And then we're also joined by Seth Wambo, who's the Senior Director on Sustainable Access to Safe Water at the Coca-Cola Foundation. Seth, welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
To both of you, I mean, we have a lot to uncover and to unlock, so maybe just to start at the very core of it, David, if I can go to you, could you speak a bit more as to what the challenge is that WWF is trying to address with its new CINSA program?
Sure. So, I mean, you mentioned it, and it's been mentioned a lot here at World Water Week, and so you won't be surprised to hear there's a finance gap.
Right.
And that's why we have Seth here, because he's going to solve it for us.
Okay, cool. No pressure, Seth.
So, I mean, the developing world faces an adaptation finance gap of $200 billion annually, right? So with this finance gap, you're going to see increasing impacts from climate change on freshwater resources, for example, right? The thing with this finance gap is the longer we wait to address it, the bigger it's going to be, right? With climate impacts, they're going to grow, and we're going to get behind even more than we are right now, right? So if you walk down that finance gap, right, there's an adaptation finance gap. A lot of things could be considered adaptation, right? But what does good adaptation look like? Adaptation that manages trade-offs and is kind of holistic in nature. Resilience that doesn't come at the expense of others or the adaptive capacity of others. There's a particular finance gap for nature-based solutions for adaptation that you mentioned, for private sector investment in nature-based solutions for adaptation, and for investment in project design and development. No one wants to finance that.
Right.
So we know nature is an underutilized source of building resilience, and like you mentioned, less than 1% of total climate finance flows go to NBS.
Yeah.
30 times that amount of money go to destroying nature, right? Wow. So not only are we growing the gap because of an action, we're growing the gap, we're going in reverse, right?
Yeah.
So why is that? How can we change that, right? There are significant kind of disincentives for the private sector to invest in NBS and at scale. They're just not set up or incentivized to do so.
Yeah.
You know, the private sector works on short time horizons. Supply chains are complex and opaque. Most adaptation projects generate savings rather than returns. You know, there are all these reasons. So we have a good idea of what these reasons are. So if you're going to develop a program or a solution set that tries to spur and blend finance from the private sector and close that finance gap, we need to acknowledge the reasons that it's not being done right now. Right. So CINSA is about addressing those so we can start to build the business case for the private sector to value nature as an adaptation tool. And it really starts with like a holistic resilience action plan, you know, engaging a broad set of stakeholders, having a systems view of what resilience and adaptation really means, and then redirecting or directing incentives and crowding in incentives for investment in nature-based solutions and holistic
Which is so
planning.
needed if I hear you, because one thing you're making clear is that we have this gap which cannot be ignored, but at the same time, indeed, that's an insane contrast to hear how quickly the problem is also sort of evolving, and if we don't do that, then the gap is only going to grow larger and it's going to be harder to bridge. So, I mean, it really does speak also to how good it is that CINSA is here and that you've been working on it. Seth, I want to go to you, and first of all, no pressure pressure, but you are, it seems, our bridging the finance gap guy in this talk show, because I just wanted to ask you a bit more about what are the Coca-Cola Foundation's sort of like motivations for investing in resilience and nature-based solutions?
Yeah, well, I mean, water is essential to communities. It's essential to ecosystems, to livelihoods, and at the heart of the foundation, the Coca-Cola Foundation, our focus is these water-stressed, vulnerable communities. And like you said, the world's lost a third of its fresh water system since 1970. So something's got to change, right? We got to put a move. And I think the heart of who we are and what we try to do is drive collective action. And so that's a huge part of what we can do, and I think the part of the influence that the Coca-Cola Foundation can bring.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great to hear. And I mean, we're going to talk about all of this more in depth in a little bit. But before we do, I just want to take one step back, because when we're talking about nature-based solutions, I mean, we hear it all the time, especially here also at the World Water Week within the communities. But if we really get to the core of it, David, could you just share some examples to also concretize for us how nature-based solutions work in practice?
Yeah, sure. I can try. So there are plenty of examples of how nature provides benefits to people, right? Mangroves providing storm surge protection, restored wetlands providing replenish or recharge and water quality benefits. But everybody wants ready-made nature-based solutions. But it requires planning, right? So a lot of that planning hasn't been done yet. No one kind of wants to buy the proverbial horse, right? They want the cart. So I think it's important to keep in mind what NBS is and what NBS is not. So examples of how NBS work best in practice. So nature-based solutions solve for societal problems. So first you have to identify that societal problem, right?
Yeah.
It starts with a vulnerability assessment. Then you need to understand how nature-based solutions fit into the broader context, so how they can contribute to the broader landscape resilience, right? So what are the enabling conditions? What are the barriers that are in place? What might be putting nature-based solutions at risk? So you develop this broad resilience action plan. So nature-based solutions should really be stakeholder-driven and tailored to local conditions. And then it's really important, I think, to remember, because again, we hear the word bounced around a lot. And it's kind of this like panacea, or this like nature. It's not a silver bullet, right? Building resilience requires a multitude of efforts that are coordinated to manage trade-offs, right? So you can think of like how do nature-based solutions work with and in the regulatory space, and the insurance space, and the planning space. So all of those things should recognize the value of nature, but not be considered NBS per se.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, if I hear all of this, we know how big the gap is. We know what they can provide, nature-based solutions. We know that, only 1% of climate financing going towards it. The million-dollar question, so to say, then is, and if I can go to you for that set, is...
I think it's the $1 billion.
Maybe the
Hundreds
billion.
of billions of dollars.
$200
Let's get specific, the billion. What's the exact number? But what is the thing that is sort of like holding up this broader investment that we need in resilience and nature-based solutions at the scale that's needed with the size of issues these days?
Well, even if we look at the funding that's coming in, I think it's primarily public funding. And so how can we look at more diversified revenue streams and specifically private investment? And so that's where we will look at scales and maybe looking at some of those obstacles that are hindering more private investments. And I think maybe two, do we have some more bankability, more bankable projects, and also more sustainable projects? So I think there's a couple of challenges. I think the nature-based solution work, we're realizing that it also needs long-term operation and maintenance, so some new revenue streams that may look at the long-term reliability of it. And then how do we de-risk it more? How do we make it more attractive to private investment?
Right.
And so maybe some ways that we can think about this is it's always great to learn from other sectors, right? Whether it's the energy sector, but also look at maybe some of those traditional integration with maybe our traditional water and sanitation service delivery projects. How can we start to bring some of these very siloed sectors? It's kind of hard to think. You think the water supply and the water demand sectors would work seamlessly together because the water systems are integrated. That's not happening. And so maybe taking advantage of combining some of these traditional gray infrastructure projects and service delivery to provide some more long-term sustainability, maybe to a blended finance model is a way too. And I think, we're all struggling with this sort of water is undervalued. And maybe we need to start looking at these landowners, these areas of nature-based solutions as, needing a little bit of the revenue, recognizing that they have a long-term commitment to keep these places sustained and working. And saying, are there some interesting, revenue models to where as you're paying for your water service, as those that use the water can look at these places and usually the more rural areas and stuff that actually as a water service provider in some ways, and so there can be some revenue streams as well.
Yeah.
So we need innovation on not only the technology and the implementation side, but just on the financing side as well
Yeah.
too.
I mean, those are a couple of examples. David, if I could go to you, what would be some levers that you could speak to that could help also motivate different sectors and actors to, scale up investment in nature-based solutions, holistic resilience?
Yeah, a strong talking to, I think, is one good one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Seth mentioned a good number of them, but so we need that like full capital stack to build like holistic landscape level resilience, and we talk about breaking down silos too. So and then also engaging governments. There were some good sessions this week about how you can engage with policymakers to align and really redirect incentives and regulations towards nature-based solutions and holistic resilience. So a bit of a carrot and a stick situation. And there there are a lot of potential levers out there, right? We have that. We have kind of like that toolbox. We have a lot of tools in our toolbox. Some of them are just misaligned, right? And I think that alignment is really key. So, and it can be demotivating for. We talked about the 30 times the amount of money goes to destroying nature as we put into investing it. So I think alignment, because there are disincentives for doing that, or there are incentives for maladaptation, or you mentioned parametric insurance in the introduction. Like I think there's a promise in the insurance market. So one of the things is first you have to value nature, right? The real value of nature, the real value of water. So how do we do that? Accounting, and then there are methodologies out there. Then once you have that value and once you understand that value, right, how do you protect that value? So parametric insurance, we're working with Blue Marble on CINSA, offers kind of a promising, like, let's safeguard either the natural capital or use insurance payouts towards nature-friendly solutions. And then once you've done that, how do you build up? Once you've insured your risk reduction in your asset, how do you build it up? Green resilience bonds or a number of other kind of like market mechanisms out there that can really direct funding to the right type of solutions if they're designed thoughtfully. So again, it's kind of like that. How do we align and how do we break down barriers and get all of these things, all of these tools in the toolbox in the same place?
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole myriad of just options that hopefully people can be inspired by, people can act on. You're acting on them, so that's really great to see. Seth, if I would go to you and ask a bit of an in-house question, what would a donor like the Coca-Cola Foundation need to sort of like scale action on nature-based solutions for adaptation?
Well, I think that a key part of this is trust, building long-term partnerships. We have partnerships with WWF across the world, so trust in those that are implementing it to make sure, can we deliver this? Can we achieve these goals? Mm-hmm. And then long-term partners on the donor side, whether it's with governments, whether it's with NGOs, how can we build more collaboration? No one likes to really go alone. That seems kind of risky. And so I think that's a big part of who we are and a big part of with our water programming and our resiliency program is how can we bring around those long partners. So that takes, partnerships take time. Yeah. I think sometimes we think it just happens quickly. It takes time to nurture. You have to learn. You have to have, sometimes you have good relationships, bad relationships. You have to work through some of those challenges because I've never been part of a perfect project or program. And so I think that's one of the challenges that we have is how do we get, if we're going to get new money, we don't need the same donors that are just doing the same projects over and over. We have to accelerate.
Right.
So I think that ability to bring scale and leverage other partnerships to help build that more trust that people can say, hey, if the Coca-Cola Foundation is coming involved, well, maybe that can send a signal that, hey, we'd like to partner with others, and there's a chance for others to join us.
And maybe if we make that a bit more specific, can you give us some examples as to where the Coca-Cola Foundation is looking to crowd in additional resources to do finance this?
Yes, so we have programs right now, just trying to work with some of the devastated places with the wildfires in California. So working with American Forests, we have some examples we're looking to fund. So we need some more crowding funding there. We have, putting one location on where we work globally. So I think there's always options to fund other stuff. But I think a big driver for us is looking for partnerships, not only in the U.S., but partnerships globally as well, too. Yeah. But I think there's endless opportunities with that. I mean, we have a huge nature-based solution portfolio, but I think that would just be one clear example with some of the devastation in California with the wildfires, where we already have an active program going. We need to scale it up, would be an example of one.
And I mean, considering those sorts of like fields where you are working, you're scaling up. What would you say has been working? Like what's been working and how could a program benefit from, say, investment by the public sector or by other companies?
Well, I think of Recharge Pakistan as a great example of that's a partnership with WWS, the implementer. We were able to leverage a $5 million investment with like $66 million from the Green Climate Fund. So sometimes those different funds and different partners, that's a requirement to have some of that blended finance. So that's a perfect example. It's I think there's over 120 green infrastructure projects coming out of that with 65,000 acres of restoration going on. It's a huge initiative, and and you think about that, we've leveraged quite a bit, almost 10 to 1 with our investment with coming with the Glen Climate. So that's a great example of both partners needing each other to kind of help make that work, and so that was what I would say.
David, I see you nodding. Is that something you'd like to add to?
No, I mean a good example, right? There's an off-taker of like all of this good planning and this kind of holistic movement in Recharge Pakistan, right? So how do you open up those kind of blended finance opportunities? Now, so kind of like, if this sounds kind of high level, it's because it is. Like everything, it gets very specific in a different place. So this is going to look very different in each place, is all I'd say.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, taking all of this into account, everything you've shared so far, I would say it really speaks sort of like to the heart of the program, right? And I would say we need more of it. We need to scale it further. So David, I wanted to ask you, what are the next steps for CINSA? And also what I mean, everyone here in the audience, other people watching online, is there any way that they can sort of like aid in sort of like the further development of the concept?
Sure. So we're fleshing out the program in different places right now. So again, in each place, it's going to look really different. So this is about engaging kind of a broad set of stakeholders to build out, multiple incentives that are guided by like a holistic resilience vision. So there's a lot of places for people to play in this, right? And a lot of knowledge that we can gain from, other partners and other people working in the spaces about what would make this concept, this high-level concept, work in different places. Yeah. So, we want to get everyone pointed in the same direction, but if you're engaged and we have a kind of a subset of locations that we're starting to work in, we can work in a lot of different places. So if you're involved in any of those landscapes in any capacity, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll build out the program details.
I mean, that's a clear call to action. I would say everyone do it. Send an email, send a message. Finally, I mean, if we were to like bump into each other 5 years down the road, what would sort of like the ideal situation landscape look like in terms of nature-based adaptation finance? Like what does success look like in your definition? Seth, would you like to go first?
I'd love to see these silos break down. I'd love to see a large gray infrastructure work with a large green infrastructure project, nature-based solutions to maybe see even not even urban environments, the highly densely places, but also can we leverage it for more of the rural area as well too that are lacking basic access to. So I think seeing that larger collaboration, which is not really happening right now. So that's something that we're working on. The foundation is how do we bring these sector experts, those more water and sanitation focused NGOs to the nature-based solution NGOs, and see how do we help them work together as partners for greater impact on all levels of the water challenges we're facing.
Yeah. And David?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done the resilience action planning work. We're being very intentional in a place about how to do it, and we have a stepwise kind of approach and a plan, and everybody has a role in that plan. From government on down, we've set up the financing mechanisms in the place to reward or re-incentivize certain things, and we have underwriters for a green bond structure, for example, or a green resilience bond. So I think like I said, we're kind of crowding in. There are a lot of things kind of moving and pointed in that same direction, all with that like basis of that good resilience action plan and prioritizing the resilience of people and nature in that plan, and then identifying how everyone can contribute to that.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. That's definitely something worth working for. So I want to thank the both of you so much for sharing all those insights. And to everyone here in the room, thank you so much for being here. And of course, to our online audience, thank you so much for tuning in. And let's keep on spreading the message forward.